Let's start with the big news of the weekend, and at least locally, I thought, and that was what happened on the 4th of July for Oregon. And I was sitting, I told this story earlier in the show, but I saw that I knew this announcement was going to come, and I was kind of looking at Twitter for most of the afternoon because I wasn't sure exactly what time the commitment was going to take place, but there was some intel out there that Oregon had a decent chance at landing the top unranked recruit in the country remaining. I don't know if I said that right. The top uncommitted recruit left in the country. He's the number 3 overall player. Dakorien Moore is his name. He's a wide receiver from Duncanville, Texas. And he was going to commit on the 4th of July. So I'm hanging out, doing some stuff around the house. I end up pulling up the Instagram live feed. My wife looked at me like I was crazy. I'm an absolute nerd. I understand that. I got issues. I have problems. At least I acknowledge them. And I'm watching this. I didn't know how long it was going to take. His mom on his Instagram Live ends up interviewing him for like 30 minutes. And I'm like, how much of this am I going to watch? Like, how long do I let this go for? And I thought, what the hell? Let's keep it going. The ironic part of all of it, too, as he announces commitment. So they finally get done with this big questionnaire. They flip the camera around. He thanks everybody for being there. And then he said, okay, for my commitment, we got to go outside. And he takes his phone. People are following him to go walk outside. And I don't know if it was a Wi-Fi issue, if they just don't have good Wi-Fi in Duncanville, Texas. The second he walked out the door, you just got like the loading circle. And it was hilarious because, again, this is on Instagram Live. I want to say when he announced his commitment, there were close to 20,000 people watching live. Like, this was a big deal. You had LSU, Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon. So think about all those fan bases all tuning in to see where is this kid going to go. And he walks outside, and you just get this loading video, and everybody's like, oh, God, we're going to miss the announcement. We're not going to see any of this. He ends up lighting off a couple of fireworks, and he had some, like, green and yellow smoke in a box, and the smoke pours out, and everybody knows, all right, there you go. He's going to Oregon. It was also hilarious because he handed the phone to somebody in his family as he was announcing his commitment. This is a big deal. Duck fans are freaking out. This dude who had the phone, who was filming it, turned the phone around to have himself be on the camera. 20,000 people watching.
I got to get your time.
I got to capitalize on this moment. And you know what he said? I don't know if it was a friend, if it was a cousin. Maybe somebody can point me in the direction of more details on this. But whoever was holding the phone, filming themselves in selfie manner, said legitimately on his Instagram Live after he committed to Oregon that he should have gone to LSU.
Yes.
Literally, it was one of those family members of like,
yes.
I mean, if it were, should have gone to LSU, but hey, go Ducks. Should have gone to LSU. Should have gone to Baton Rouge. Go Ducks. Should have gone to LSU.
How much money was he given by someone? Which bagman got in his pocket of
like, dude, what are we doing
hey,
here?
you're Moore's handler? Why don't you do this?
And then Moore walked over and he flashed the O and he's like, yeah, go Ducks. He played. I don't even know if the kid knew that he said that on the Instagram Live because he was like 15 feet away.
Awesome.
I'm like, in front of 20,000 people, you're just crapping on this kid's commitment. It was a massive deal, though, for a number of different reasons. So the biggest takeaways that I had from this, and again, all of this in recruiting, and this is true with any prospect at any school, is it's great now. On paper, it looks great. You got to get to signing day. This kid, Dakorien Moore, he's the number 3 prospect in the country. He is already committed and decommitted before. He committed to LSU like a year and a half ago, or a year ago, give or take, and then like last May, decommitted from LSU and reopened his recruitment. Now, LSU remained in one of his final 4 schools. So you got to get him to signing day. That's the caveat with all this. He said that he's going to shut his recruiting down at this point, but like these are 18-year-old kids. Like, would anybody be shocked? No. So all of that is, the caveat is added before any of this is said, that you obviously have to get him to fully commit and sign his letter of intent on signing day, which is never an easy deal because people are going to be throwing bags of cash at this kid over the next however many months to try and get him to flip his commitment. But the first thought that I had, and I don't know what went through your mind when you saw this news, Will, because you follow the Oregon program, but
I do. Yeah.
I remember when Lanning was hired, and it was funny because it happened in the same offseason cycle as Lincoln Riley. And there was this conventional wisdom when Lincoln Riley was hired at USC. Twofold with Lanning. One, Lanning is hired as a counterbalance to that. USC got the offensive mind. They got this guru who wins Heisman trophies. Look how good Lincoln Riley's offenses are. We need to keep up with USC. Let's go find the defensive-minded head coach. That was a conventional wisdom argument that was made. And I understand, and I think there's some validity to it. There was also the added argument that Oregon better get used to not being able to be elite offensively because they're not going to get the best offensive weapons. If you're an offensive weapon, 2 years ago, if I asked you this question, you're a top wide receiver in the country, Will Ortner.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather go play in Lincoln Riley's offense or unknown head coach Dan Lanning's offense?
Oh, 100%. You want to go play for Lincoln Riley.
Not even a debate, right?
Right.
Like, that guy wins Heisman trophies. He's got elite weapons all over the place. Defense is another issue for him, but we're talking offensive skill position players. Basically, it was Oregon's going to have to get the leftovers offensively, and maybe that will be enough with their defense to topple USC and Lincoln Riley and what they're going to build.
Right.
And I just had this thought bubble as this happened on the 4th of it's crazy how much has changed in 2 years. And I think it's one of the most underrated and untalked about aspects of Lanning's first 2 years, where we get caught up in all these different headlines of fourth down decisions or not beating Washington or, hey, he hasn't won a Pac-12 championship or, all these different narratives out there around him. I think sometimes we lose sight of, I don't, because I had to suffer through it, how much he has revamped and upgraded Oregon's offense in a way that I didn't even know was possible when they hired him. When they hired him, I remember doing an interview with Danny and Dusty because I was down at his introductory press conference. I drove down, and I remember this. It's funny, the random things that stick out in your brain. I remember driving back, and I was going to play a round of golf at Persimmon, and I pulled into the parking lot, and Danny and Dusty asked me to come on the show, and I was like, can we make this spliffy, guys?
We got to hurry up.
I got a tea time in 7 minutes. Can we get this thing going here a little bit? But I remember them asking me, what were the takeaways of the introductory press conference, and how do you feel about him as a head coach? And I answered who the hell knows? He checks every box on paper. He's a great recruiter. He's a young guy, good defensive mind. He comes from a coaching pedigree of Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. All those things are wonderful, but we have no clue how it's going to translate. And we were on the heels of watching this happen with another Northwest school in Jimmy Lake. Jimmy Lake was the coach in waiting in Seattle. He was such a hot commodity. We have to lock this guy up. Pete steps down, immediately replace him with Jimmy Lake. It seemed like a seamless transition. And we interviewed Jimmy Lake at Pac-12 Media Day that summer going into his first year and just thought to ourselves, this guy's going to kill it, man. He's got it. He is a great personality. He's just got this infectious energy with him. He is awesome. He is going to do great things at Washington. And then he hired John Donovan to be his offensive coordinator and ran an offense from 1981, and he was fired after a year and some change because he had all those weapons offensively, and they couldn't score a touchdown against Montana. So this idea that you get a defensive coach, you just never know how the other side of the ball is going to look. And for Oregon, it's been such a breath of fresh air. I remember their first spring game, Kenny Dillingham's calling plays, and just Bo Nix is the guy. Okay, let's see how bad this is going to be. All the skepticism that was out there about how ugly it was going to look. And I remember the spring game watching it thinking, hey, at least they're chucking it down the field. At least they're making plays. It's kind of fun brand of football again. And that has been the case the last 2 years. After suffering through 4 years of Mario's offense, of running the ball on 3rd and 7 with Justin Herbert as your quarterback, it's been a revelation to see them offensively. And this just added to it this weekend. This is the highest rated commit in the history of Oregon's football program. The highest one. I think statistically, Kayvon might have been number 1 on some boards, but when you rank the metric, every prospect has
right.
A score, a 94, 95, 90, whatever. He is, statistically speaking, the best recruit in the history of Oregon's program, and it is at a position that Oregon has historically not been very good at. Now, if you're a diehard fan, you remember a lot of the names, but they've never really had, until maybe Troy Franklin, if you want to argue it, but he was a 4th-round pick, a bona fide number 1 dude, first-round NFL draft wide receiver. And this guy is the number 3 player in the country who is a world-class speedster, has the ability to become that, again, if he signs on the dotted line.
Well, I think the biggest thing here, and you touched on it a little bit with Jimmy Lake and with Dan Lanning, is who Dan Lanning has hired as his offensive coordinators, right? The big thing is when you go and get a head coach, even if they're not a CEO type, like Coach Lanning is, right? He is a defensive specialist. He is going to dominate, and I expect him to dominate defensive recruiting, and he's done a great job. The D-line that he has brought in, going into the transfer portal and getting Birch, but then also going and getting young players like Uyunglele, Mateo, and Purchase, who those guys are only going to get better the older that they get, the more that they play. He's proven he can recruit his side, but what he's done is he's made 2 dynamite hires, getting Dillingham in and getting Stein in, and they run 2 different styles of offense. Dillingham is much more option-based. He wants RPOs. He wants different options on every play. Hey, you can run here. Quarterback can run. There's also a slant on the backside if the linebacker's crashing down. So he's got 3 or 4 options. It's just an extended version of the triple option, where Stein's is much more there's one option, but we're going to spread everybody out, and someone on this play is going to get open. He doesn't use the quarterback running as much, but it works, right? You can see the difference in the offense between Dillingham and Stein. The only thing that you don't notice is a lack of production because there wasn't any, right?
No.
So he has shown an ability to go out and hire dynamite OCs. And the big reason why I think you landed Moore is because of your wide receiver coach. He went out and he got Junior Adams. Junior Adams is the same guy that developed that UW wide receiver core. He went out and plucked him out of Seattle. He made him his wide receiver coach, and he's now landing these big name wide receivers, and he's developing them. You can see the growth last year in what Tez Johnson was when he first walked onto campus to the end where he's a bona fide number one, and then you go out and get the number one wide receiver in the transfer portal in Evan Stewart. So what I think is the most important is Coach Lanning knows how to recruit, but he also clearly knows how to hire coaches and position coaches that can recruit players to come and play in that system and then can develop them, because that's where you've seen the big growth. And that's why Oregon is on the trajectory that they're at. And it's why I don't think you're crazy or Josh Pate is crazy or any of the big name national media guys are crazy when they say Oregon should probably win a title in the next 5 years, because that's what you've built. And that's not just NIL.
No, you're on that trajectory. You are building towards that. And speaking of Pate, we'll play a clip for you in the next segment. He had, on his show last night, talked a little bit about this. And you're on your thing on the offense coordinators too. Like when they hired Kenny Dillingham, I remember that being, for a lot of folks in the industry, a questionable hire. He was not a guy that called plays. He was under offensive head coaches, super young. Like that was a roundly criticized hire. And he became a head coach after 1 year. And how many more years do we think Will Stein's going to be in Eugene?
You're lucky if he's there after this year.
After this year, you're lucky. If he sticks around for 3 years, you're lucky. He seems like a smart guy that's going to wait for the right spot to open up, and he's not just going to go chase a random job and build something out of nothing. But he is an up-and-coming young dude. He's a great recruiter, a good offensive mind. Like, he's going to get that job as well.